If you were to think about one of the biggest talking points in the automotive world over the last few years, it's probably been the amount of Chinese brands that we've seen come into the European market. And a lot of these brands are, well, they're fairly new in some respects. Even the sort of the more established ones can only trace their roots back maybe 10, 20, 30, maybe even 40 years. But there is one that can trace its roots back, well, a lot further than that. Over 100 years in some respects. And that brand is MG. The once proud British marque that was bought by the Chinese was brought back by them into the UK and Europe and has seen considerable growth and success since then. In fact, MG are now sold in over 120 different territories across the globe, and in 2024 amassed sales of over 400,000 units. And not only that, the UK is the second biggest market after their home market now of China. MG, it would appear, like their old advertising slogan used to say, are roaring back. And now we have a new one to look at. Welcome to this week's road test review. Welcome to the new MGS6 EV. Please sit yourself down, make yourself comfortable in the house of cars. Now, MG's transformation from a plucky British sports car company into a relatively mainstream manufacturer of normal family cars is a story that we all know about. And of course, when they entered back into the UK, they were bought by people that wanted, dare I suggest, a good value for money electric car with no frills, but maybe had a recognisable badge on the front of it. And that's exactly what you got with cars such as the MG ZS and of course the MG5 estate car. But since then, we've seen an awful lot of these Chinese brands move into MG's territory and offer exactly the same, with, dare I suggest, maybe a little bit more, well, a little bit more value for money than even MG were offering. So they really needed to up their game a little bit. It started with the MG4 hatchback, a brilliant electric C-sector 5-door family hatch that entered into the market and is still a really good buy and their biggest seller here in the UK. And of course, we saw a halo product from them with the MG Cyberster. And now they've given us some technological showcase cars with their IM branded ones, the IM5 Saloon and IM6 SUV. But at their heart, they want to really appeal to that core family car sort of buyer. And they've given us the MG S5, their smaller top of B segment sort of SUV. And now we have this, the MG S6 EV, a car that they say is going to compete in the very competitive C SUV market. But can it? But before we start, as always, let's take a look at the main points of the new MG S6 EV. Now, MG say this is their entrant into the C SUV market and will sit between the recently launched MG S5 EV and larger IM6 SUV. It's the third MG to sit on the company's MSP modular scalable platform that's already underpinned the MG4 hatchback and MG S5 EV SUV. It comes fitted with a 77 kilowatt-hour battery that can deliver a range of between 301 and 329 miles depending on model. It can be had in either single motor rear-wheel drive or dual motor all-wheel drive configurations. And prices start at just under £38,000 for the SE long range and climb to just under £44,000 for the dual motor trophy model. Now at that price, it needs to compete with some very, very strong European opposition, which means that the MG has to appeal not just in the showroom, but out here on the road where it counts. Can it? Well, let's put it through a House of Cars road test review and find out. Right, let's start with the styling of the car. Now, I think MG are really getting into their stride with their styling, I have to say. When they first came along with the old MG ZS and then obviously the HS and the little MG3 hatchback and things, even the MG5 estate, they were all right. They didn't really offer a huge amount of frills, and they didn't really offer a huge amount of design language between the models in some respects, but that's been evolving, and I can really see a lot of similarity and a lot of commonality in their design language, especially with the MG4 hatchback and of course the recently launched MGS6 EV, because those are the two cars that sits on this MSP platform that obviously the S6 sits on as well. But you can also see a little bit of Cyberster in the car as well. So whilst those IM branded products don't really look like the rest of the MG cars, their core range, these ones, are really starting to become their own little family. And I think it's a very distinctive look that they've got here. Now at first glance you're going to think that it is just a sort of like a slightly larger MGS5. And you know, as I say, if one was to drive past you in the street, immediately you'd think, oh yeah, it's the new S5. But there are differences and you can see them. Now they're going to start at the front here, obviously, where they've got that sort of X motif that they brought along with the MG4 hatch, where you've got these sort of like DRLs that sort of like really spear into the middle there, and in this line here, so you get that X motif. You see it? Now that's, as I say, common on the MG4 and, as I say, the new S5. And down at the bottom you've got this central sort of like spine, if you like, here, that just sort of like divides the two parts of the air dam, and that's very similar again on the MG4, MGS5 and Cyberster. It has that as well. While I'm down here, let me just talk about this here. Obviously you've got this opening and closing shutter in here, obviously, that helps aid cooling through into the battery. Of course your main lamps aren't up here, they're down here, so your main dipped and main beam lamps here. This is a trick a lot of manufacturers are doing, so your eyes immediately think these are the lights, but actually they're the lamp units down there, and they're mounted quite low down there. This area here is different to the S5. You'll notice a difference here. If I put the two of them up on side by side on the screen, you'll see a difference in there. Forward-facing camera, which obviously, you know, is part of the tech pack that you sort of get on the car. And again, like, you know, it's sort of like a lot of the cars now, the MG4 and the Cyberster, the big sort of like chromed MG badge sitting loud and proud on the nose there. It's quite pointy at the front as well. It's quite a sort of like a sharp-looking car, and I have to say, I think it's really distinctive. And I do think it's starting, as I say, MG are starting to really get their own design language with this core range of cars, and I think it's a good-looking machine, this. I really do. Now, I had a little bit of a bone to pick with MG this morning in their presentation, because all the way through the press pack they're talking about this being a C SUV. Well, pardon me for saying that. This is a hell of a big car for a C SUV. Now, the MGS6 EV is 4.4 metres long, which means it's the same length as the Renault Scenic E-Tech and a Nissan Qashqai, two very traditional type of C-segment SUVs. This is 4.7 metres long, with a wheelbase of just under 2.9 metres in length. This puts it into almost D-segment territory, but they say that's what the IM6 is there for. But they always say that they try to position themselves right at the top of each segment. Well, whatever you decide is a C or a D or whatever type of car it is, this is a big car, and you'll see that when we move on to the inside of it. Right, as I say, you can see obviously the similarities to the S5. You know, it's very similar type of car. Now, you get two models. You get an SE or a Trophy, which is fairly standard MG stuff. SE models will get 19-inch alloy wheels. Trophies get 20s. This is a Trophy model, so this has got the 20-inch alloy wheels, which is sitting on Michelin tyres here. Good tyre. You get little wind deflectors down just at the side there, and these are sort of like more aerodynamically designed alloy wheels on the car, which MG say help contribute to a relatively low 0.27 CD drag coefficient. It's not that low. Some manufacturers manage to get it less, but they reckon it adds up to nearly 30 miles of range just by those little additions on its own, which is, well, that's fairly commendable. As I say, there's a lot of tech around the car. Obviously you get little cameras mounted underneath the mirrors, nice big door mirrors on the car, really good visibility on it, and good visibility overall. You know, you get nice sort of like, you know, open sort of like windows here. There's no big sharp lines that come up into the back there, into the roof line to hinder three-quarter vision. You know, you get a nice low belt line, good big windows on the car, which is nice. You get this sort of like satin titanium silver finish on the bottom of the doors here, which then tie that into the standard fit load-bearing roof rails on the car, which is quite nice, and a little bit of luxury with the chrome trim around the side of it. Nothing fancy like pop-out door handles, proper just big chunky door handles to get your hands round. And the doors themselves wrap underneath the sills, and you'll know that if you're a regular viewer. I like that because it means you don't get your trousers dirty as you climb in and out the car when you're in a slightly muddy car park like this. But yeah, it's a handsome beast, but I tell you what, it's a big car, this. I like the back of it. I really do. It's really nice, smooth back to the car. It looks really good. They've got this lovely light bar that runs across the back of it with like a three-dimensional lighting signature in here, which is quite common with the MGs. I remember when the MG4 hatchback came out and it was the same. It had this weird sort of like lighting pattern across the top of the light bar, and it just gave it a really distinctive look to the back end of it. And they've managed to do something similar with this car as well. So yeah, I like the way this car looks at the back, and it's really smooth when you see it. There's almost a little hint of Mercedes-Benz about it, just the way it's nicely smoothed round at the back, which makes it look quite premium, and I like that. Nice big roof spoiler, as you can imagine, with your integrated high-level brake light there. Obviously a rear wiper, because you need it, you know, practical car. Reverse camera, as you would expect to see, and then of course more of the black plastic cladding round the bottom, and again with that sort of central sort of like spine area there, you know, just like you had at the front there, it ties it all in. Some nice neat just badging across there, MGS6 EV, and of course again your chromed octagon there. Nothing groundbreaking, nothing trend-setting, nothing to really get you sort of like hot under the collar, but nothing that's controversial either, I think. I think it's a good looking car. And I think what they're, as I say, they're managing to do is get these core models sort of like really tied in with one another, even within, you know, even bringing that Halo product, the Cyberster, into the same design language is really, really going to help these. And I think, you know, that they are one of the manufacturers that we've seen, as I say, I get into trouble. I always still think of MG as being a British company, and everybody says, oh, they're owned by the Chinese, they're a Chinese brand now, da da da. Irrespective of what you think, of all the Chinese brands that have come in, I think MG are the ones that really, really do stand apart with the styling a little bit. I really like the way that the MGs are really starting to look now. I'm not so keen on the IM5 and the IM6, but their core range I really do like. But look, that's my opinion, and it's not worth toffee, is it? Let's be honest, it's your opinion that matters. You're out there buying these cars, and a lot of you are buying MGs. Do you like the look of this? Would you come out of, let's say, an MG HS plug-in hybrid to go electric for the first time? Now they've got this slightly larger one there. Have you had a ZS EV and you need something a little bit bigger now? Would this tempt you to trade up? Have you got an MG4 hatchback but want to go into this SUV style of car? Is this the car for you? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. I had another little bone to pick with them this morning because they told us about the boot space, and I thought, that's massive. 674 litres, they said. 674 litres. Now think about that for a second. A Skoda Enyaq is 570 litres. I thought, that's over 100 litres bigger than an Enyaq. That's to the roof. Okay, whereas most manufacturers measure to there. Irrespective of that, however, that is still a big boot space, okay? So there's plenty. I don't have my luggage with me. I'm obviously in the UK launch. And also, apologies, I am stood in this rough bit of ground where I'm slightly higher than the car, which means my head is banging this. When it's on a level ground, that is a little bit higher. It's just where I'm stood there. But even so, if you're a 6 foot, watch that. If you fold down the standard 60-40 split rear seat, however, it takes total capacity up to 1,910 litres. That is huge, and as I say, there's a huge amount of space inside the car. You fold up the boot floor and you think there'll be loads of storage there, and you go, there isn't. In fact, there is none at all whatsoever. The battery, as in the 12-volt battery, that is in there. However, you do get storage up at the front, which I'll show you in a second. But you do get some nice little bits in here, and as I say, it's not, again, one of the comments I've made on some of the Chinese brands is they don't offer some of the other little things like hooks and hanging things. You do in the MG, so you get the little netted pockets at the side there. There is tie-down things down at the corners there, which is good to see as well. Is that a little hook? I think that's a little hook in there as well, so you can hang bags from. So they are starting to catch up with some of the European manufacturers that have been offering that type of thing for quite some time now. But irrespective of whether they've measured it from the floor to the ceiling or the floor to the parcel shelf, that is a decent size of boot for a family car. Now, if you do need more storage, then there's some up the front. 124 litres of it, which is a decent amount of space. You know, this particular car, you've got the charging cable bag in there, but actually that's a large amount of space. You could put a carry on there or certainly a good couple of rucksacks. And the other nice thing is it's all finished in plastic. It's nicely finished, you know, there's no sort of bare metal underneath here. It's all covered in trim, and it's all plastic trim, which means it'd be nice and practical to keep it clean. You know, I've been talking to a lady here who's out walking her dog across the fields this morning. You know, you come back, she's just changed her boots and throw them in the, the back of her car. You could chuck, you know, muddy walking boots in there, and when you get home just give it a wipe clean and stuff. I think that's really practical. But yeah, that's certainly a decent amount of extra storage if for whatever reason you feel that that massive boot isn't enough for you. Now remember what I said about that wheelbase length. It's a good length of wheelbase, that, which means that translates into a huge amount of interior space, as you would expect. Now that's my driving position and I'm 5'8". Now admittedly, if you're 6 foot, that'd be slightly further back. The only thing I will say is two things. First of all, the floor does feel a little bit pushed up, you know, as you do in a lot of these electric cars. And, you know, it's a little bit tight, although the seat is all the way down. It is a little bit tight for your feet underneath there, but generally speaking, you're going to lounge a little bit more than that. So there's plenty of space, you know, as a family car, I would suggest. You probably get 3 across relatively easily. There is a flat floor across here as well, which is good. The ISOFIX points are behind these sort of Velcro covers. They're easily accessible and that's quite nice. I prefer that to the zips, so that's okay. I quite like that. You do get fold down armrests with 2 cup holders in here, and of course you get mat pockets on the backs of the front seats and relatively decent door bins in the back as well. Now this is a trophy model, which means it gets this massive big glass panoramic roof. It doesn't open, and there is a blind as well, which is quite neatly integrated in the back there. It doesn't seem to sort of impede too much into headroom. They've managed to get that styled nicely, that roller blind into the back there. I'm going to talk a bit more about it when we move into the front, but I will mention it just very, very quickly here. The quality of materials, what a big step up from MGs of old that we've seen, you know, so when they first started arriving in the UK. With the new IM branded cars, the IM5 Saloon and IM6, you know, again, there was that sort of step up in material qualities that we saw. Now we know they're not really MG cars in some respects, they're just sold under the MG banner within Europe, you know, for other reasons, although they are owned by SAIC, the parent company of MG. But we're starting to see a real move up in the quality of the materials used in their core range, and this is the first one. Well, actually, in fairness, the S5, I did notice that, but in the S6, this is really nice, and this trophy has this sort of almost, well, it's not real leather, it's, you know, obviously it's pleather, but you know, with this sort of almost suede type of material in the middle of the seats. If you go for the SE, it's a black cloth trim, but this trophy model with this almost suede and leather type of finish in here, it feels really good. It feels quite premium, you know, in this sort of market space, as you would expect. But in fairness, it's not the cheapest car in the marketplace, which we'll get onto in the pricing section. But anyway, in terms of rear accommodation, very good. You get vents obviously there. There's 2 USB-C charging ports there. And I say there's plenty of storage. So yeah, as a family car, this is going to tick a lot of boxes for a lot of people. Now, one thing I mentioned when I did my road test review on the MGS5 over on Auto EV was, and I mentioned it just in the back there as well, one of the things that I really noticed on that car was the step up in quality of materials. And again, it's evident here on the MGS6. Again, there's been another step up in quality of materials. Now, I'll talk about the seats and stuff a little bit later on, but not just the materials used, but the quality of the design as well is elevated up from, you know, when you think back to things such as the MGZS and the MG5 estate when they first came into the UK, you know, they offered, you know, a decent car, but no frills in some respects. I don't want to say it was just a budget brand. It wasn't, but you know what I mean. There was just elements of it you thought, well, that's not quite as good as some mainstream cars such as, you know, Vauxhall, Peugeot, whatever, Citroën, whatever. Very much not the case now. You know, if anything, you know, they are sort of like really, really snapping on the heels of people at Volkswagen, Skoda, you know, and things like that in terms of quality. So there's a nice use of materials on the car here on the dash. One thing I did criticise the S5 for was the fact that it was quite grey inside. On the S6, in the trophy model, you now get a choice of colours on the interior. So you can either have this grey or you can have a sort of beige interior, you know, which is really nice actually. It's a really, really nice finish inside the car. One thing I will commend them for is no piano black, just a tiny little bit on the button pack on the switch on the steering wheel. That's it. The rest of it's this sort of graphite, almost carbon fibre metal finish here, round here, and then across the dash. Thank you, MG. Brilliant. I love the fact that it doesn't really have any piano black in it. It's lovely. And it's everything just has a real nice quality feel to it. You know, turning sort of like, you know, knobs and switches. This is the one that I noticed. You know, I remember first driving an MGZS and the transmission dial, you know, had a little bit of a rattle to it. You know, you could move it around. It doesn't anymore. You know, it's just the quality of the way it's sort of like damped now. even just pushing the button, it feels like, you know, something from a premium brand, you know, like Audi, Skoda, you know, BMW, that type of thing. So they've concentrated on little things, and it's making a big difference, I think. It's a very similar layout to the MGS5, but it's got a slightly more rising console here, which is nice because you get a nice armrest. You know, it's a nice height for me, certainly, in that sense. You get a decent amount of storage. You get 2 cup holders here, and they will take my big Yeti flask. There's a big centre door cubby box in there that will take a proper big family size bag of Monster Munch in there. And the other nice thing is when you press that, it's just got this nice little damped action as it flips up. You know, nothing feels loose anymore, which again is good. There's a massive big area underneath the console, which has got a rubber mat on the bottom so things don't slide around, and that's repeated in the door bins as well. So again, it's little things, you see what I mean? It's just little things that they've done that makes a big difference. The fact if you drop your keys into the door bin, they're not going to rattle on cheap plastic. They've got a rubber mat on the bottom of them. I really like that. And that's your sort of storage, if you like, and there's a decent amount of it. On the Trophy, you get a 50-watt ventilated wireless charging pad for your mobile. So you just drop that in there. And all cars are quite well equipped to standard. So you get things such as heated front seats, heated steering wheel, Apple CarPlay, Android Auto, a load of advanced driver assistance systems in the MG Pilot, which I'm going to talk about in a second as well. All of that standard on the car as well. You get electrically adjustable seats. You get a reach and rake adjustable steering wheel as well. There's memory positioning on the seats, certainly on the driver's seat of this Trophy model as well. But the seats aren't perfect, and I'll talk about that in a wee second. Right, let me just go on to this here, this 12.8-inch infotainment screen. MG used 2 screens, which I really like. The fact you've got a separate driver's display, and it's not your sort of like generic white one that we seem to be getting on a lot of the Chinese brands now. It's a configurable screen. There's 3 configurations available in this screen here, depending on what you want to see or what you prioritize. I think it's you either prioritize the ADAS systems, the media, or trip, I think it is. Anyway, there you go. You can set it up how you want it. But there's 3 different configurations you can choose to have that. Oh, the other thing that's new is you got a head-up display as well. First on a core MG product as well. You get a head-up display. Nothing fancy, it's not augmented reality or anything, but it's a decent head-up display, which is nice to have. Right, this 12.8-inch screen, the software is much improved over those earlier MGs. Again, very similar in sort of like layout, so if you've had an older MG like a ZS, this will look quite familiar to you, but the way it reacts and the way it responds to your touch now won't be familiar because it's a lot faster. As I say, standard Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, as you would expect. You can go in there, you can go underneath it. Now, this MG Pilot, I want to talk about this. Obviously, setting up advanced driver assistance systems on cars, you want to turn things off, such as the speed limit warning, the lane keep assist, the driver attention monitor. Those are the 3 that I just really annoy me. And you think, oh, I've got to go in there and turn all that. Look, they're all this massive big menu of stuff there. Nah, what you do is you set it up into what they call MG Pilot Custom. Okay, so you set that up in there, okay, and then when you're on this home screen, all you have to do is swipe down from the top, and there it is there, MG Pilot Custom. Press that, and then press it to confirm, okay? That's all you do. So it's not unlike having the Renault, my Perso button on the Renault, you know, where you press it once and then press it to confirm. It's the same thing. There's only one extra thing where you've got to swipe down to bring it up on the screen. That's good, I like that. So when you first get the car, okay, you can go into your MG Pilot and just set all the ones up that you want. Program it into the MG Pilot Custom, and every time you swipe down now, you can just turn it off. What's easier than that? I mean, that's really good. Well done, MG, for listening to people. But there is a huge amount of advanced driver assistance systems. You obviously speed limit warning, overspeed, lane keep assist, front collision assist, assist mode, alert sensitivity, lane departure assist, emergency lane keep assist, rear driving assist, rear cross traffic assist, door open warning, that type of thing. The car has just got a 5-star Euro NCAP award on the car, and I think they said it's got something like 92% occupant safety. So well done, MG. Fabulous, you know, really, really good. But I like the fact you can turn stuff off easily. Okay, the software is now a lot better, you know, there's no doubt about it. You also now get inbuilt infotainment online services. So you can see there's Spotify, YouTube, TikTok, Amazon Music. So that's on the car as well. So you can obviously, if you're subscribed to those things, you can go in and set up your accounts in those. So you can go in and use it. Well, YouTube's quite handy. Obviously, if you're charging, you can just sit and watch, well, I don't know, a House of Cars review while you're obviously charging your new MGS6 up. But as I say, you also get things such as Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. The screen's nice. It's well mounted up here. It looks complicated there, but in fairness, that is also then supplemented with some physical controls for the stuff that you might need at a quick glance. Now, I did criticise this a little. Well, I say I criticised it. I did mention in the S5 review, you've got to be aware of what these things actually do, because when you look at the pictures on them, first of all, you think, ah, that's great. That's for turning your fan speed up and down. It's not. That there is the temperature for this side here. Although it's got a picture of a fan on it, that's actually for turning the temperature up on the passenger side or down. And the one with the little home button on it here, that's for actually turning the temperature on the driver's side. It's only when you press it, it takes you back to your home page. That's why that is. And that button there, why it's got a fan speed on, you press it and it turns it on or off. Your fan speed button is actually this rocker switch to the side, okay? And then this rocker switch on this side is actually the volume for the media. So get used to where they are. They're not what you think they are at first. They may take a bit getting used to. And then you get 3 centred buttons there for full defrost, the front screen, hazards and your heated rear screen. So that's nice and easy to use. As I mentioned, the transmission selector there, that's we've seen that used to, but as I say, the quality of it's much better. Right, steering wheel. I don't know. I don't find this wheel very comfortable. I just don't know. Just when I've been driving it today, and I found this with MGs as well, for some reason the ridge of it just seems to hurt my hand a little bit, the heel of my hand. I don't find it a particularly nice wheel to hold. It's nice in the sense that it's this sort of squircle style of wheel, and it's 3-spoke in design, and of course you can see that design is almost mimicked for the front and rear of it. And it's just got enough buttons on it, so you've got things such as your cruise control on the left, you know, your camera, your speed limit warning, your speed limit assist there, you know, so you can set a limit so the car doesn't go over it on there. And then on this side here, this is your media controls as well, okay? So I like the fact it's not got a huge amount of buttons on it, and they're nice and they're easy to use, and they're physical buttons. I just don't find the wheel particularly comfortable to hold. I don't know why. There is, however, 2 favourite buttons on it, which is quite good, and again you can program these. So for instance, on this car, if I press the left one, it brings up the regenerative braking, and you get low, medium, strong and adaptive, and there is a 1-pedal drive mode as well. The right one on this one is your drive modes, and you get normal, sport, comfort, snow and custom. So there's loads of, but I think you can assign those to various different things. And then in the door panel, you've got obviously the usual suspects, 4 electric windows plus your mirror controls as well, which is there. And also you get things such as auto lights and auto wipers and stuff. Last thing to talk about, as I say, is this driver's display, which is really, really good. Speed on left, you get a trip meter thing on the right, but see, you can configure it. It's not the generic white one we've seen on, you know, things like this, the Geely and some of the BYDs and stuff. It's MG's own, and it is quite nice. It's quite clear. It's nice and easy to read, and as I say, with this sort of like squircle steering wheel, you're looking straight through it. Plus, it's now supplemented with a head-up display on the trophy, which is good. Last thing to discuss is the seats. They're all right, I have to say. The only thing I found with them driving the car around this morning is I find them a little bit short on the squab for me. I'd like a little bit more cushioning at the front of the squab. I would personally like it to be able to tilt, but that's a personal thing. It doesn't have tilt adjustment on it. And it sort of lacks a little bit of side bolstering, but it's not horrific. It's actually okay. I'd need to do a much longer drive on it to turn around to say whether or not you find it comfortable or not. But they certainly would probably be fine for most people. But the big thing for me is the upward move in quality of materials. It's really nice. You know, all this sort of soft touch, bounce back, you know, sort of like leather type material on the dash, you know, the lacquer piano black, it's all this almost carbon like metal finish there, which is nice. You know, sort of like the buttons are physical, and as I say, they've really put some effort into changing sort of like how these buttons sort of like feel when you turn them and push them and stuff, and it feels a lot better than MGs of old. So it's another upward movement on the quality of the car. And as I say, you know, when you see the seats with this sort of like half leather, half suede on this trophy model, that's really nice as well. So yeah, MG have really upped the game when it comes to quality. Not just quality of build, but quality of design, quality of usability. This is a good interior, and I really could, I think this is a real sort of like standout part of this car, especially as a family car. Well done, MG. Really impressed. Now, all MGS6 EVs get the same battery, 77 kilowatt hour one. Now, you get a choice of 3 models. You get an SE, a Trophy, and both of those are single motor rear wheel drive, and they will give, according to WLTP figures, a range of up to 329 miles. Your third option is a Trophy dual motor car, obviously more powerful, but that drops the range down to 301 miles. Now, the interesting figure for me, however, is the charging speed. They reckon on the DC it does 144 kilowatts of charging speed, but they quote a 10 to 80% charge time of 38 minutes, which I don't think is all that impressive. I would have thought that they could have got under that 30 minutes, which says to me that I don't think it stays at that 144 kilowatt charging speed for very long. Now, it depends on what flavour you want your MGS6 EV as to sort of like how many wheels are being driven, dare I suggest. If you go for a single motor car, which you can have in either SE or Trophy guys, then it is 244 PS that the car produces, and power sent to the rear wheels, and that will do 0 to 60 in 7.3 seconds, which is about right for this size of family car, dare I suggest. If you go for a dual motor car, however, you can only have that in the Trophy guys, and that ups the power quite a bit, 361 PS, and that will drop the 0 to 60 time down to 5.1 seconds. Unless you need the traction, dare I suggest, I would probably go for a single motor car. The range doesn't drop drastically. I think it goes down from 329 miles to about 301 miles, but I just think the rest of the car can't quite keep up with that level of power. Now, I'm not suggesting it's a bad car. It isn't. It's a really good car. It drives really, really well. But I'm just saying that, there are limits to what, sort of like a large family, tall SUV type of car can handle. And it's not really a sports UV, if that makes sense. It is more of a family EV, and that's why I think the single motor car is probably the sweet spot in the range, and the one that MG themselves think they'll probably sell the most of, and I'd agree with that. How does it drive? I think it drives really, really well, in fairness. Sorry, some really low winter sun. I think it drives really, really well, to be fair. There's a couple of things it's not perfect about, however, and I'll get to those in a minute, but on the whole, really good. MG, I think, have been on this sort of like path, if you like, of evolution in some respects. As I say, with the styling, with the quality, the materials they've been using, and dare I suggest with also how the cars are driving as well. You can really feel that there's a lot of sort of like engineering know-how being put into this car, especially for UK style of driving. On these sort of back roads around about West Berkshire into Oxfordshire, the car is behaving really, really well. It's got nice body control, there's a nice weight to the steering, as I say, the sort of like weight behind the throttle pedal, the acceleration that you get from the car. There's nothing really to complain about here. It behaves itself really well. The body control is good, the ride quality is good, even on sort of like slightly more pockmarked, sort of like less than perfect surfaces, the car behaves itself really well. There isn't the jitteriness that you feel from certain other cars in this class, and dare I suggest some of the newer Chinese brands. It feels well damped. The spring and damper ratings, I think, are really, really well judged. However, it isn't perfect, okay? One thing that has surprised me a little bit is the amount of road noise. There's quite a bit of noise comes into the car. It's not as refined as I was sort of expecting it to be. You drive an Enyaq or a Renault Scenic after you've driven this, and they're like a Rolls Royce in comparison. Now, I'm not suggesting it's overtly noisy, it's just that you do notice more external noise coming into the car than you do in those other two cars that I've just mentioned. So that's worthy of mention. As I say, the road noise isn't quite so good, and I don't think it's just down to tyres. I think there's also a lot of air rushing around the arches. I think it's sound insulation or lack of that's causing the problem. You know, some more sound insulation around about the wheel arches and things would probably solve the problem, I would suggest. So that's a little bit disappointing, I have to say. And in some respects, while the damping and the spring ratings are, you know, really well judged, if you do pitch it into a bend that little bit too fast, there's no getting away from the fact that it is a big car. You do get a little bit of body roll in the car. There's a lot of lean from it, you know, as you go into that bend, and to say the weight sort of takes over. So although the battery and everything else is way down low, it's still quite a big car on top of that, and that element can be really felt if you go into a bend just that little bit too fast, which is why I would suggest staying away from the performance model. Don't go for the dual motor, as I say, unless you must have the addition of the traction. I don't think it's really needed. Other than that, there's quite a lot to like here. The driving position, I mentioned the seats earlier. I feel like I want a little bit more under, sort of like the, you know, behind my knees. That's me, you know, and it'd be nice to be able to tilt the seat. But in fairness, there is a good range of adjustment from the seat and the steering wheel. You do sit in this quite nice and sort of high position. You get a good view out. I was saying earlier about the styling. The fact they've kept that sort of like low belt line along the side of the car, it gives you great visibility, that over the shoulder, you know, visibility. You're pulling out of a tight junction, you can really see well behind you. I think that's a real boon with this car. I think they've really thought about that. So that's good. That has to be commended. And as you see, you sit nice and high. This armrest, this heightening of this console gives you a nice position for your arm to sort of rest on in longer drives, and the controls just really fall easily to hand. The fact you've got this rising console, that's really nice. That's been well thought out as well. And as I say, the fact that you get this updated software in this screen now, you know, everything's fairly quick to respond, you know, it responds to your touch fairly well. You've got the physical buttons for the things that you need to use on the move quite quickly, such as your heating and ventilation, your volume for your radio, that type of thing. That's nice, the fact that they can be got at easily, and the buttons on the steering wheel are just nicely positioned as well. So that's all good, all of that is good. So it is tiny little things that I can fault it with, and dare I suggest, they're probably things that maybe affect me more than they would affect you. It depends how you feel. You might find that the seat's perfectly fine for you. I'd like a little bit more bolstering. That's the only thing I would say. I just think it needs just a little bit more on the backrest and a little bit more underneath the thighs. Other than that, a decent seat and a nice driving position. The only other thing that I find, as I say, that steering wheel just isn't the most comfortable, again, for my hands, but you might feel differently. If you've got an MG and you get on well with it, it hasn't changed, okay? So if you've got this steering wheel in your current MG and you're thinking of trading up, it's fine if you get on well with it. Just personally for me, it just doesn't fall into my hand particularly well. But the clarity of the dash, the clarity of the driver's display, the usability of this infotainment system now, the way that this sort of, you know, sweeps up and everything else, can't fault it. Right, back to the drive. Sorry, I waffled a bit there. Back to the drive. So if we now think of the brake regeneration, let's just go into this now. Oh, hang on, it's the other one. So strong or adaptive. So it depends obviously what's in front of me now. I'll use the camera. So for instance, I'll come off it now and there's no brake regen because there's nothing in front of the car. So if I go into low, medium, strong, it really hauls the car up. So you can really feel it haul the car up, which is nice. So if you're a fan of the one pedal driving, you've got that. I personally don't. I'm not a big fan of it. However, if I use the pedal, it's a good strong feel on the pedal. Slight sponginess to it, not quite as powerful as I'd want, but don't get me wrong, there are other cars in this class that feel way worse. So, you know, good pedal action from it, that's absolutely fine. The steering's got quite a nice weight to it in the normal mode. I quite like that. Now, it's quite manoeuvrable. If you have the single motor car, I think it's 11.1 meters is your turning circle on it. If you go for the dual motor car, it extends that up. I think it's 12.4 meters is your turning circle on that. But out here on the back roads, the steering's good. You know, it's not too vague at all. So even in the normal mode, when you sort of like put the car into a bend, you do feel that there's some feedback. And of course, because it's rear wheel drive, in the single motor car, you've got no power sort of like corrupting those front wheels as such. And again, another reason probably to go for the single motor car. And it's fast enough, as I say. I don't think you need a car of this sort of ilk to be any faster than that. Not unless it is actually deemed to be a sort of like a sportier version, you know, like an X-Power version, where they've toughened up the suspension and the brakes accordingly and made it more of a sports utility vehicle. When it's just a standard SUV like this is plenty powerful enough and all you would need. So in summary, I think they've made a really good car here, and I think again, you know, with MG, as I say, this evolutionary path they seem to have been on, this doesn't feel like some of those, and please forgive me for this, more value orientated, cheaper Chinese brands that we've been seeing of late. This feels like a proper competitor in the market. This feels like a car from a legacy manufacturer, which, let's be fair, MG now are. You know, they've been doing this a while now and doing it well, and that's exactly what this car feels like, and it feels worthy of the price. You know, there are cars more expensive than this one, you know, which don't drive anywhere near as nicely as this. But just from the point of view of a spacious, well-equipped family car that feels good on the road, it's nice to drive, it's comfortable, I would think for the majority of people out there, there's a lot to recommend with this. This is a really good new car from MG. They've really done well with this. The S5 was a real step change, and again, this feels like another one again. Lot to like about this. Good car. Now, pricing. There's 3 models in the range currently. You start with the SE, which starts the range off at $37,995, and then effectively you've got a £3,000 walk up to the next trim level. So when you move up to the Trophy, it's £40,995, which is a bit of a shame they couldn't make it $39,995 just to bring underneath that £40,000 threshold for that luxury car supplement we seem to get saddled with here in the UK. They told us they tried their best to do it, but they just couldn't make it work. So anyway, that's what that is, $40,995, and it's that long-range Trophy single motor car that they see as being the sweet spot in the range and probably the biggest seller. And then last but not least is the Trophy dual motor car, which is $43,995. Now, all cars are really well equipped to standard, that's what I will say. But again, given the fact they're saying it's a C SUV, that's very much pricing up against some D SUVs in this range. But as I say, that standard equipment level, the fact that it is such a big car, and of course you do get MG's 7-year warranty as standard on the car, does mean that it is quite a decent value for money proposition when you take whole life costs into account with that. Now, let's talk about this competition thing, because as I say, I do sometimes get a bit hung up on putting cars into certain classes, and as I say, I really questioned them this morning when they kept saying it's a C SUV, and I'm going, it's not really, it's a bit bigger than that in some respects. They're going, no, what you see is a C SUV, it'll sit right at the top of the C SUV segment. Okay, whatever you say, MG. If that is the case, then what's the competition like? Well, I think it's going to be things such as the Renault Scenic E-Tech, you know, maybe something like the new Nissan Leaf, Toyota CHR Plus. Those are C segment sort of like SUVs. So that's the sort of car you're looking at. But bear in mind, you can buy those cars less money than this car. So therefore, do you look at it as a D segment SUV? Well, as I say, MG are sort of like moving away a little bit from being seen as a value brand. Well, so let me just rephrase that. They don't want to be seen as a cheap brand. They want to offer good value for money. And I suppose in some respects, we've seen that sort of like thing from a lot of the new Chinese brands that have come into this market space. People like Omoda, Jaku, now Geely with the EX5. That's a car I think that could be a big competitor for this, you know, that car. And as I say, that's a car that I drove not that long since ago. And I think that's quite an impressive car, you know, certainly one of the more impressive of the Chinese brands that we've seen in the last couple of years. And that is, you know, offers quite a lot of space for a similar type of money than this car as well. And then, of course, you've got things such as Omoda with the E5. Jaku, well, Jaku, they brought the slightly smaller car, the smaller EV in, didn't they? The B5. Oh, sorry, the Jaku 5 EV. That's a slightly, much more of a B segment car. So it's not, that would compete with something like, say, the S5 EV. So they don't really have a fully electric model as yet. to compete with this car. But as I say, there's plenty of others. Leap Motor, the C10. Now that's a car that offers a huge amount of space for not a huge amount of money in relative terms. And of course, you've got more established players. And of course, Leap Motor are part of Stellantis Group, which also includes things such as Vauxhall, and they have the Grandland, which I think is a great car for the money. And of course, Peugeot, you've got things such as the 3008 and 5008 from Peugeot. Citroën, they've got the new C5 Aircross. That's a car I'm going to be testing very, very soon, as well as Kia with the EV5, another new electric offering in this class that I'm going to be driving very, very soon as well. And of course, you've got sort of like the Volkswagen group of cars as well, haven't you? So of course, Volkswagen ID4, which is a car that MG lists as a competitor, which makes me think you're seeing it as a D segment as well. And of course, the Skoda Enyaq as well. So there is a lot out there for your money, and it will depend on whether you see this, as I say, what size of car you see it as, or whether you're just looking at it from a budget point of view, what other cars you would compare it to. But you do have a relative, if it does straddle those two sectors, the C and the D segment, you do have a lot of choice available to you. Over the last couple of years, with the sort of like introduction of an awful lot of new brands into the UK, especially from China, Omoda, Jayco, Geely, BYD and so forth, it was sort of easy to forget about MG being the first of that Chinese wave and the success that MG had in those first early years, and they've quietly been building on that success. The only problem was with those first MGs, the ZS EV, the MG5, even the little MG3 hatchback, they were always, I felt, bought on affordability rather than desirability. They were seen as a little bit of, to my mind, a sort of like a cheaper value brand. But slowly over the last couple of years, they've been changing that, and they've been changing that the right way with product. We've seen an awful lot of new product from MG, and they've been quietly changing the perception of people, especially in the electric market. Of course, gone is the ZS and the MG5. We've now got things such as the MG4 hatchback, the MGS6, and of course, don't forget the technological showcase cars, the IM5 and the IM6, as well as their Halo product, the brilliant Cyberster. And now we have this, yet another shift in MG's portfolio with this new MGS6 EV, a really worthy addition to this sort of medium-sized, irrespective of what you think a class is in, family electric SUV. Those groundworks that MG laid all those years back, coming back into the UK, really were building blocks for what we've now got. And the new MGS6 EV is yet another brilliant new electric car into the market, wearing an MG badge, and it's well worthy of it. Thank you for watching another road test review here on House of Cars. As always, please make sure you are subscribed to the channel, and then when you've done that, make sure you turn on your notifications so you don't miss the next episode when it's uploaded and it's gone live. If you've enjoyed this week's review, and obviously I hope you have, give a little thumbs up for me, would you? And of course, as always, make sure you leave me your thoughts in the comment section down below. What do you think of the new MGS6 EV? Does it tickle your pickle? Would you trade out a Skoda Enyaq or a Volkswagen ID4 to go for an MG for the first time? Would you rather have it in a BYD or a Geely? Let me know your thoughts down below. Now, if you're into social media, you can follow me on Instagram. I'm over there and I'm at House of Cars 1973. So if you want to give me a follow there, I'd appreciate your support. And remember, whether or not it is a new car or an old car, a small car or a large car, a slow car or a fast car, you'll find them all here in the House of Cars. Thank you again for watching. Thank you for your continued support. I'll see you again soon.